Before esports, before downloadable content, before games came with cinematic trailers and a 100-gigabyte install, you had to plug in a cartridge and hope it booted up and go to war. The 90s console era wasn't just about graphics or specs. This was the golden age of couch co-op and schoolyard trash talk, where every game came with its own mythology. Whether it was blowing in a cartridge to make it work or holding down secret button combos to unlock hidden characters, this was when video games were harder, weirder, and low-key, way more fun. The consoles we're diving into weren't just about machines. They were portals. They turned your living room into a dojo, a spaceship, a football field, or a haunted mansion. They taught you how to problem solve, how to compete, how to rage quit with dignity or not. These were the machines that raised the generation. So grab your favorite controller and let's boot up the consoles that defined the 90s. If you ever had to blow into a cartridge, smack a reset button, or wrap your controller cord around the whole system to store it, smash that like button like you just landed a Street Fighter combo. Subscribe if your idea of multiplayer meant elbowing your cousin during GoldenEye, and hit the comments to let us know which system made you a gamer for life. Now, when the Nintendo 64 dropped in 1996, it wasn't just a new console, it was a seismic event, a system that didn't just play games, but rewired your whole brain with 3D worlds, split-screen battles, and more hours lost than a Blockbuster inventory sheet.
The games of Nintendo 64.
The first thing you noticed, that wild controller. 3 grips, 1 analog stick, and a trigger underneath like it was made for a video game gunslinger. No one knew how to hold it at first. Some kids grabbed the sides, some went middle and right, and some just gave up and used both hands like a game genie was gonna bless them. But once you figured it out, game over. When it came to games, Super Mario 64 changed everything. It wasn't just a game, it was a full-blown dimension. You weren't walking on a screen anymore. You were inside the castle, jumping through paintings. It was like a cartoon Doctor Strange. It was freedom. It was smooth. It was unreal. And then there was GoldenEye 007. Ask anybody who was there, they'll tell you it was the birth of multiplayer beef, 4-player split screen, odd job ban rules, screen watching accusations, and throwing shade with proximity mines. That was modern warfare before Call of Duty even laced up.
We will live the game through our hands. We will be in control of something. We will change the system.
Yeah, the cartridges made it bulky. Yeah, the memory packs were a hassle. But when it was running, you were locked in for the next 6 hours. The Nintendo 64 wasn't just a console, it was a movement. And if you owned one, you knew you were playing on a different level. Nintendo might have changed the game with 3D worlds and 4-player madness, but Sega was already loading up the cartridge chamber. The Genesis wasn't friendly, it was fast, loud, and ready for smoke.
He brought forth Genesis, a system with twice the power, twice the intelligence, twice the challenge, twice the fun.
Released in 1989 but peaked hard in the early 90s, the Sega Genesis didn't come to play nice, it came to flex. This system had edge, it had speed, it had that dark, sleek black casing that looked like it belonged on the dashboard of a stealth jet. This wasn't just a console, it was a statement. Where Nintendo had mushrooms and plumbers, Genesis had attitude, and his name was Sonic the Hedgehog. Blue blur, red kicks, ring-chasing chaos. Sonic wasn't just fast, he was cool. He smirked at the screen when you left the controller alone. He had theme music that slapped. He was the embodiment of Sega's whole brand. Louder, faster, bolder.
So he gets Sega Genesis, the ultimate action system. And then he buys Mortal Kombat, the arcade edition, and the all-new Shinobi 3, and Marvel's X-Men.
The Genesis library was stacked. You had Streets of Rage, Altered Beast, NBA Jam, Mortal Kombat, with blood. Unlike Nintendo's censored version, you had Shinobi and the ever-addictive Columns. This was the console that brought the arcade into your house and made sure the parents were slightly concerned. Let's talk about sound chip. The Genesis sound was gritty, synth-heavy, and went hard. It had that crunchy, distorted, almost grimy soundtrack that made every game feel like it needed a boombox and a pair of Reebok pumps. And if you were about that life, you upgraded with add-ons like Sega CD or the 32X, turning your console into a chunky cyber tower that looked like it could launch missiles. Did it always work? No. Did it look cool? Absolutely.
Free your columns free.
What Nintendo?
Buy a 16-bit Genesis system between now and October 31st and get an extra game.
The Genesis was the rebel console. It wasn't trying to be friendly, it was trying to win. It pushed Sega into living rooms everywhere and made the console wars a real thing. While Sega doubled down on speed and edge, Sony stepped in with cinematic cool, a gray box with a disk drive, and a startup chime that meant business. Next stop, the PlayStation. When the PlayStation hit the scene in 1995 during its US release, it didn't just enter the console wars. It walked in wearing sunglasses and kicked the door off the hinges. Sony wasn't a part of the original fight, but it showed up like, y'all done? And then proceeded to dominate the rest of the decade. First off, it ran off CDs, not cartridges. That meant more storage, better sound, and the wildest thing we'd ever seen on a console up to that point, FMV cutscenes, full motion video for the youngins. Suddenly, games had full-blown intros with voice acting, real music, and characters who didn't look like they were made out of 5 triangles in a dream.
全てのゲームはここに集まる。ゲームの塊、プレイステーション。出た。
And yo, that startup sound still gives people the chills. That booming whoosh, the chime, the black screen with the white Sony logo. It felt like something important was about to happen. Half the time it didn't even load right, but that moment, oh my goodness, iconic. And then there was the controller, comfortable, familiar. And when the dual shock dropped, game over. Analog sticks and vibration feedback made every explosion and crash feel real. You weren't just watching action, you felt it in your hands.
Remember, do not underestimate the power of PlayStation.
The PS1 didn't just change what we played, it changed who played. It changed who we were. It wasn't just about the kids anymore. Teenagers, adults, even grandparents got in on the action. This was gaming growing up, and it brought a whole generation along for the ride. PlayStation redefined gaming, but even before that, Nintendo still had more to say in the 90s. They reached back into the vault and gave us the most refined 2D magic we'd ever seen. Super Nintendo brought beauty to the beast.
This kind of experience, because no one else creates these kinds of games. Now you're playing with power, superpower.
Launched in 1991 in the US, the Super Nintendo was Nintendo's way of saying, oh, you like video games? Cool, now let's make them beautiful. The SNES wasn't just an upgrade, it was an evolution. Everything got better. The graphics, the music, the controller, and the games, timeless.
They say it has 16-bit technology, whatever that means.
Oh, I see. What else do they say?
That it has 3D graphics and digital stereo sound, and that Super Mario World is included.
Okay, well...
Let's talk visuals first. This thing had Mode 7 graphics, which basically meant the games like F-Zero, Pilot Wings, and Super Mario Kart could fake 3D motion with spinning backgrounds and slick movement. For 1991, this was witchcraft.
Racing game of F-Zero, you're in a futuristic race car. Oh, I guess I should watch where I'm driving instead of talking. The 3D effect, as you can see, is pretty good by video game standards.
The controller, pure comfort. 4 face buttons, 2 shoulder triggers, and that perfect grip design that still influences controllers today. The SNES didn't try to be cool. It was cool, effortlessly. It refined what made the NES great, polished, with 16-bit power, and gave gamers a system that felt like the heart of a generation.
Our video game industry is hotter than ever this season, and one good reason, Nintendo has introduced some hot new toys. But have things gone a bit too far?
But Sega wasn't just sticking with the old playbook. They went big, bold, and confusing. Dual processors, arcade vibes, and a launch that tripped over its own ambition the Sega Saturn had next for a minute.
Buy Sega Saturn now, and while supplies last, we'll give you 3 top-selling arcade games.
Released in 1995, the Sega Saturn is the console equivalent to a cult classic movie, slept on in its time, misunderstood by the masses, but deeply respected by those who knew what it really was. This wasn't your average plug-and-play system. This was Sega trying to launch into the future before the world was even ready.
But are you ready for the future?
Introducing Sega Saturn. Aw, hit it.
First off, let's talk architecture. The Saturn was loaded with dual processors, tons of graphical horsepower, and a design so complex it gave developers headaches for days. Sega basically handed programmers a race car without instructions and said, figure it out, which is exactly why some games looked amazing and others looked like they were coded in a microwave. The controller was oddly great. 6 face buttons, smooth D-pad, perfect for arcade-style gaming. If you were into fighting games or side-scrolling brawlers, the Saturn felt right in your hands. But Sega fumbled the rollout. They dropped it early without enough games, confused retailers, and priced it higher than the PlayStation. By the time they caught up, Sony had already taken the crown and left Sega looking like the kid at recess with the coolest toy nobody asked to play with. Still, the Saturn was special. It was bold. It was experimental. It had heart. And if you owned one, you knew you were a part of a secret club. Elite, misunderstood, and just a little bit stubborn. It stumbled, sure, but Sega came back with one last swing. Online play, VMUs, cel-shaded skating. Dreamcast wasn't just next gen, it was the next dimension. Too early, too real, too slept on.
We got her!
Released in 1999 in the US, the Sega Dreamcast was the final shot Sega fired into the console wars, and honestly, it was a damn good one. This machine was light years ahead of its time. Graphics, gorgeous. Speed, instant. Vibe, immaculate. It felt like the future in a bright white shell. Let's start with innovation. This was the first major console to have a built-in modem. You could plug in and play online multiplayer in 1999, before Xbox Live, before PSN. You were playing Phantasy Star Online and talking smack on NBA 2K long before your cousin could figure out dial-up.
Where'd he learn that?
NBA 2K on Sega Dreamcast.
The memory cards were wild too. The VMU, Visual Memory Unit, wasn't just a save card. It had its own screen, its own buttons, and could run mini games like a Tamagotchi from the future. Imagine pulling your save file out of your controller and taking it to school to grind a few stats during lunch. Yes, Dreamcast was built different. The controller was bulky but iconic. Analog trigger buttons, memory card slot, and that little screen that made you feel like you were piloting a mech suit. So why did it flop? Timing. Sony was about to drop PS2 with DVD playback and a bigger brand. Sega burned goodwill with the Saturn, and most importantly, people were scared to bet on Sega again.
Sega Dreamcast. It's thinking.
But if you knew, you knew. Dreamcast was the hip-hop album that didn't go platinum, but changed the game for everybody who listened. It was the most beloved swan song in console history. And while home consoles were battling for the living room, one little handheld was here quietly conquering the world. No Wi-Fi, no backlight, just batteries, grit, and Pokemon. Let's end on the portable legend, the Game Boy.
It's called a Game Boy, the personal game-playing system from Nintendo, with lots of sports, action, and puzzle games to choose from. And it comes with...
And for head-to-head competition, use the revolutionary video link and blow your opponent away. Game Boy, only from Nintendo. Now,
when Nintendo dropped the Game Boy in 1989, it was already a revolution. But by the time the 90s hit full swing, it was everywhere. On the bus, in the classroom, in the barbershop, at family cookouts. If you didn't have one, you were either grounded or born in the wrong era.
introducing Game Boy. It's portable, it's in stereo, and its games are interchangeable. Plus, Game Boy comes with the outrageous new game, Tetris.
This chunky little gray box had no backlight, a greenish screen, and graphics so basic they made Pong look detailed, but none of that mattered because the gameplay, flawless. It gave us Tetris, Super Mario Land, Metroid 2, Dr. Mario, Kirby's Dream Land, and by 1996, the culture-shattering drop, Pokemon Red and Blue. Let's pause there. Pokemon didn't just sell Game Boys, it enslaved kids' palms for years. You and your homies battling on the playground with that awkward link cable between systems, iconic. Trading evolved monsters like your life depended on it, legendary. Then Nintendo said, yo, let's give it some color. And boom, the Game Boy Color hit in 1998.
America the beautiful. Game Boy Color. Get into it.
Get into it.
Same formula, same heat, but now in purple, lime green, see-through atomic purple, the only one that really mattered. And yes, actual color graphics, no more monotone. Pikachu was yellow now, baby, straight up. The Game Boy Color ran off AA batteries and it chewed through them like a Sega Game Gear with a sweet tooth. But we didn't care. We'd rob every remote in the house just to squeeze in another hour of Wario Land or Zelda Oracle of Ages. And through all the console wars, the N64 versus PlayStation debates, the Sega's last gasp, the Game Boy stood unbothered, still selling, still ruling, still the most important pocket-sized machine in the world. It wasn't flashy, it didn't pretend to be. It was consistent, it was comforting, and it was the soundtrack of growing up in plastic form. And that's the console saga of the 90s, wrapped and retrofitted. These weren't just machines, they were moments, from the chunky controllers to the cartridge blow rituals. The console wars weren't about specs, they were about connection, about staying up all night with cousins, unlocking secrets, rage quitting, and swearing you'd never play again until 5 minutes later when you did. The 90s weren't about realism in games. They were about magic, about plugging into a pixelated universe and becoming whoever you wanted. No graphic card required. If this episode took you back to sleepovers, Pizza Hut demo discs, and cheat code notebooks, drop a like it's a power-up. Subscribe if you're riding with us through this golden age of gaming, and hit the comments to tell us which console was your king, which game made you cancel your weekend plans. Thanks for watching the series, and we'll see y'all on the next level. Peace out, y'all.